Hi, everyone, and welcome back for the Tools for Perseverance. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about patterns and stories and how they add to our conflict. We talked last time about emotional chandeliering and having that big reaction to a little stimulus. And now we're going to talk a little bit about these patterns and stories that help, that sort of add fuel to the fire of our conflict. In this picture, as you're looking at it, try to find the animal. I'll give you a second. Can you find the animal in the picture? Depending on the lighting that you have, it might be easier or harder to find. If you can see my mouse, we've got the animal here, right? We've got an animal right here. So we've got an ear and an eye and a mouth and a nose. This is a lion, right? There's a lion hidden in the grass here, sort of waiting, sitting there. And I want to use that example of a lion because our brains have evolved to recognize patterns, right? Whenever we are recognizing a pattern, something beautiful happens in our brain and that it lights up with dopamine. We get a wonderful burst of this happiness hormone. It's a facilitator between your neurons. And it is something that makes us feel very happy, dopamine. And so when we find and recognize a pattern, our brain lights up. And that evolved to help keep us safe. If we're walking through grassland and we look over and see a lion, if we can spot the lion in the grass, right, if we can see the pattern, if we can pick it up on what was going on, it helps to light up our brains, helps to keep us safe. So finding patterns makes us happy, and we evolved it to keep us safe. Stories are a really, really powerful form of pattern. So all stories have a setting, a conflict, a resolution. Stories are patterns, and they have really key components that we've come to expect. I highly recommend, if you are interested in stories and storytelling, Pixar has beautiful content that they put out online about storytelling and how storytelling works. I highly encourage you to watch it. If that is something of interest to you, because they are master storytellers and they have a lot of great content online. But if we recognize stories as patterns, then we know that they are something that makes us happy, right? If we sit and listen to someone else's story and it follows this pattern, and it has a setting, a conflict occurs, and then there's a resolution, something lovely happens in our brain. The dopamine is released. It's why storytelling is so powerful for teaching, because for centuries and through most of humanity, we've taught each other through the power of stories, because they are incredibly powerful to our brains. They make us happy. If you've ever been talking with someone and they start telling a story and they give you the setting and they give you the conflict, but they don't give you the resolution, it feels frustrating, doesn't it? It feels frustrating. You feel let down. Or if they start telling a story and it's all setting, right? They just give you the setting. They just start talking and you think, surely this story is going somewhere. Surely this person has a point. Surely there was a conflict and resolution. You're hungry for that conflict and resolution to occur within a story, right? And then if someone just tells you the resolution, it feels a bit like a skeleton, right? It feels like it's not fleshed out. It feels not meaty enough. So that drive that we have to look for a setting, a conflict, and a resolution as the key components of a story is really deeply ingrained in us. Everyone has that one relative that when they start talking at Thanksgiving, you know it's going to be all setting, or you know that they're going to tell you the setting and the conflict but not give you a resolution, right? So you've got this innate ability to hear stories and what other people are saying. And something really important happens. If we can take a little story. So the pattern at the bottom, let's say that this pattern is right here. This is a little story that I hear today. If I can fit this small story that I'm hearing today into a large story of how the world works. So see this, we've got the two purple lines and then the circle. If we can fit this story of what's happening today in with an existing pattern where it goes, triangle, purple line, circle, triangle, purple line, circle. If we see a triangle and we say, oh, look, this fits right here, right in nicely into our understanding of the world, something really powerful happens. So if I can take the story of what happened today and make it fit into the larger story of how I understand the world, something really powerful happens. We actually get a double burst of dopamine because our brain rewards us for recognizing what happened today as a story, and then it rewards us for fitting that small story into a larger story. It makes us really happy when we can do that, when we can take a little piece of what's going on today and fit it in with a larger context of how the world works. So our brains reward us for finding stories that reinforce our previous understanding of the world. If we already have a scaffold for how we think the world works, and we find a story that happens today, we get a nice reward in understanding how the today fits in with the larger context. So the other thing is that our brains like to filter out the positive and remember the negative. And this is not because we are negative people or the world is grumpy or that anything like that. This has to do with our evolution and how we learn to survive. So if I'm in the jungle and I'm hunting for berries, there might be 25 different types of berries in the jungle that are safe for me to eat. They're not going to hurt me. They're going to feed me. I can eat them and help, satisfy the caloric needs that I have to survive. I don't remember all the details of every single thing. Our brain is trained to forget the details of each of the berries that are safe because our brain really needs to remember the berries that are gonna kill us. So our brain really needs to remember those few berries that are actually going to be poisonous. And we need to remember all the details. We need to know, does it grow in the shade or in the sun? We need to know, does it grow, pointed shaped, like these leaves are pointed next to these berries. This is going to help us to remember. If we can remember all the details of something negative, something that's dangerous, something that's a threat, if we can hold on to every one of those details, it's going to help us to prevent us from eating the poisonous berries in the future. So remembering that these berries, right, that these techniques of remembering the details of poisonous versus non-poisonous berries, right, is why we hold on to the negative. That's why we cling to the details of something negative. If you've ever gotten feedback from someone, they might say 5 beautiful positive things about a presentation you just gave or a piece of work that you've just done, but they say one negative thing, and I bet you can remember word for word what the negative thing was. You remember it in detail. Maybe you even remember what they look like when they said it, because our brains are trained to remember the negative and filter out the positive, okay? That's a thing that we have evolved to do. Importantly, we also get a reward for using limited data to solve a puzzle. So I'll give you a second. What do you think this says? This puzzle, who can solve the puzzle for me on Wheel of Fortune? It's surprise road trip, right? We get really happy whenever we can use limited data to solve a problem, to solve a puzzle. So that the issue is our communication. This is a screenshot of a conversation I had with one of my staff several years ago. And in this conversation, we've got some emojis, we've got a GIF or two, and then we've got a Bitmoji of my face. This was a whole conversation that I had with my staff. increasingly we are using more and more limited data to have conversation, right? All of these pictures and these texts are actually open for interpretation. I knew what it meant at the time, the conversation, but I have no idea what it means now. I don't remember what we were talking about, what any of this meant. So most conflicts arise from miscommunication. And so these conflicts are arising from miscommunication. And when we have limited data, so let's say I just have one email from you with a few words in it, that's going to be fairly limited data. If I have a text from you that is obscure, or I don't really know what it means, that's going to be limited data. If our communication involves just a very small amount of information, that's going to be a limited data. And all of that means that I have to fill in the blanks. I have to add the context to it, to interpret it, to understand what it is that you're meaning. And that's where a lot of conflicts can arise, from miscommunication. So here's the thing. An existing story, we want to always look for an existing story. This is what we're trained to do, right? We tend to hang on to the negative, and we tend to fill in the blanks from limited data. And all of this is like the perfect soup. It's like the perfect storm. It's like the perfect combination of elements to create conflict. So I want you to think about your task to write into the chat box today is, has this happened to you where you've had you have an event that happens today, a small event, and you fit it into an existing story, and maybe it's negative, and maybe it only uses limited data. So first question for the chat box, has this happened to you? And second of all, under what conditions do you think conflict is most likely to occur? So when in your life is conflict most likely to occur? So for me, when my anxiety is really high, if I haven't had my coffee yet, those are times in which conflict is really much more likely to occur, because I'm much more likely to have a large reaction to a small event, right? So think about, when is this perfect soup of conflicts going to occur, right? Where you have an existing story, it's negative, and it's limited data. Write in the chat box, let me know, has this happened to you? And then, when is it more likely to occur during your day? I can't wait to hear what you have to say.